She didn't know it yet. But the moment Cindy Whitmer whispered, "I need a husband by tomorrow," her life split into a before and an after. Before, she was just a waitress hiding from an abusive past, counting hours until the system took her son away. After, she became the legal wife of a man whose name never appears in newspapers but moves judges, police, and criminals alike. What Cindy didn't know was the man who offered to marry her in a rain-soaked diner wasn't saving her out of kindness. He was making a calculated decision, one that would expose his empire, awaken his enemies, and put a child at the center of a silent war. By signing that marriage certificate, Cindy didn't just secure her son's future, she became someone's weakness. And in Roman Rue's world, weaknesses don't survive for long. This is not a love story that begins with trust. It begins with desperation, and a choice that can never be undone. Cindy Whitmer had faced the possibility of losing her son before, twice, if she was honest with herself. Once when she fled her husband with nothing but a backpack and a bruised wrist. Once when she spent a night sleeping in her car, holding her 6-year-old close, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. But this time was different. This time, the threat didn't come with raised voices or slammed doors. It came with a calm, professional tone and a deadline that didn't care how much she loved her child. The call came a little before midnight, just as the diner was settling into its quiet hours. Cindy stood behind the counter, wiping the same clean surface again and again, her body exhausted, her mind floating somewhere far away, when her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. She almost ignored it. Almost. Something made her answer. The woman on the line introduced herself as a representative from Child Protective Services. Her voice was measured, clipped, every word placed with care, as if emotion were an unprofessional liability. She recited Cindy's file like a grocery list documented domestic violence, unstable housing, lack of legal family structure. Then she delivered the sentence that drained the color from Cindy's world. If Cindy could not present proof of a lawful marriage and a permanent residence by noon the next day, her son would be placed into protective custody. No extensions, no appeals, 14 hours. The call ended with a soft click, polite and final. Cindy stood there long after. The phone pressed against her ear as if the voice might come back and admit it had made a mistake. It didn't. Around her, the diner hummed quietly, rain hammering against the windows in thick, angry sheets. Outside, her car sat in the parking lot, dark and tired, its back seat still cluttered with blankets and a small stuffed rabbit. That car had been their home for 3 weeks. That car was about to be used as evidence against her. She slid onto a stool, her legs suddenly weak. 6 months of running, 3 weeks of pretending things weren't as bad as they were. Years of loving her son fiercely, desperately, the way only someone who had been unloved could. All of it had been reduced to a simple verdict: she wasn't enough. Her chest tightened until breathing hurt. Cindy bowed her head, pressing her forehead against the cool counter. She didn't scream. She didn't curse. She broke. Quietly at first, then with sobs that shook her shoulders, the kind that came from a place too deep to be dignified. Tears dripped onto the laminate, blurring her reflection into something small and fragmented. Between ragged breaths, she whispered the truth she had been avoiding all night. "I need a miracle." The words tasted bitter, desperate. Then, barely louder than the rain, she said the most irrational thing she had ever admitted out loud. "I need a husband by tomorrow. She didn't know she wasn't alone when she said it. At the booth directly behind her, a man sat with his back to the wall, untouched coffee growing cold in front of him. Roman Rue hadn't planned to stop at this diner. He rarely planned anything that involved fluorescent lights and greasy menus. He had pulled off the highway to avoid a police checkpoint, a routine calculation for a man who survived by never being exactly where he was expected to be. He was used to listening without being noticed, to observing lives from the shadows without ever touching them. He had made one rule for himself a long time ago: never get involved with women and children. Innocence was a liability. Caring was a weakness. He had built an empire on the ability to walk away. Then he heard her voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was broken in a way that cut straight through him. The word baby spoken like a prayer and a confession at the same time, landed in his chest with a force he hadn't felt in decades. For a brief, unwelcome moment, he saw another woman, years ago, standing in a room full of men who wouldn't help her. He remembered how small he had been then, hiding behind her legs, learning what the world did to people who asked for mercy. Roman's jaw tightened. He stared at the surface of the table, his hands perfectly still. This was none of his business. He could finish his coffee, leave through the side door, and forget he'd ever heard that voice. That was the smart choice, the safe one. Instead, he stood. His movements were unhurried, controlled, the way they always were. He crossed the short distance to the counter without making a sound. Cindy didn't notice him at first. She was wiping her face with a napkin, trying to pull herself together before anyone saw her like this. When his voice finally reached her, it was low and even, carrying no judgment, no hesitation. "I can be your husband." For a heartbeat, Cindy thought her mind had finally snapped. She froze, certain she had imagined it. Slowly, she turned her head. He stood a few feet away, dressed in black, broad-shouldered, his presence filling the space as if the air itself had shifted. Dark ink traced the edge of his collar and disappeared beneath his suit. His eyes were steady, unblinking, holding hers without pity or amusement. He looked dangerous in a quiet, controlled way that made her instincts scream. What she whispered. He didn't repeat himself. He simply waited, as if patience were another weapon he knew how to wield. Cindy's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. This had to be a joke, a cruel one. A stranger overheard her breakdown and decided to play hero. "I'm serious," he said at last. "You need a husband by tomorrow. I can be that." Fear rushed through her, sharp and immediate. Everything about him warned her to run. But beneath that fear was something else, something colder and more honest. Hope, ugly, dangerous hope. She hated it. "I don't even know you," she said, her voice cracking. "This is insane." "It is," he agreed calmly, "but insanity doesn't change the clock." She stared at him, searching his face for mockery, for desire, for any familiar motive she could understand. There was none, just certainty. Cindy thought of her son, of his small hand clutching hers in the dark, of the way he trusted her to keep him safe. 14 hours. The system didn't care how she felt about strangers. Why, she asked? The word raw. Why would you do this? For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Old, buried, painful. "Because I know what happens," he said quietly, "when no one helps." The rain continued to fall outside, relentless and uncaring. Cindy felt the world narrowing to a single moment, a single choice, salvation or disaster. She didn't know which stood in front of her. She only knew that time was running out, and Roman Rue had just offered her a deal that would change everything. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Cindy didn't answer him right away. She couldn't. The diner felt too small, the air too thick, as if his words had altered the gravity of the room. A stranger offering marriage should have sounded absurd, laughable even. Instead, it landed with terrifying weight, because some part of her small, exhausted, and brutally honest recognized it as the only door left open. She studied him again, this time more carefully. He wasn't smiling. Men who joked in moments like this always smiled, always softened their tone to seem harmless. Roman Rue did neither. He stood there as if he had already calculated the cost of his offer and decided to pay it. That certainty unsettled her more than any threat could have. "You don't know what you're saying," Cindy murmured, her fingers gripping the edge of the counter. "You overheard me for a few minutes. That doesn't mean it means enough," he interrupted gently. Not dismissive, not impatient, just firm. "You're out of time. You said that yourself." She flinched. He was right, and she hated him for it. The clock was ticking inside her head now, loud and merciless. 14 hours. 13. Really. Every second she wasted here was another step closer to losing her son forever. "People don't do this," she said, shaking her head. "They don't just marry strangers because they're crying in a diner." "Most people don't," Roman replied. "I'm not most people." There was no arrogance in the statement, no attempt to impress her. It sounded like a fact he had accepted long ago. Cindy felt a chill crawl up her spine. She had known men who talked big, who built themselves up with lies and bravado. This man didn't build himself at all. He simply existed, solid and immovable, like a wall she had just slammed into at full speed. She slid off the stool, needing space, needing distance. "I don't even know your name," she said. "For all I know, you're dangerous." Roman watched her closely, as if measuring something invisible. "I am," he said. "That's why I'm offering terms." That stopped her. Terms. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, giving her time to react if fear overtook reason. When his hand emerged, it wasn't with a weapon, but a simple business card. He placed it on the counter between them. Roman Rue. A name. A number. Nothing else. "You need a legal marriage," he continued. "You need an address. You need someone who can stand next to you in court and make the system hesitate before it decides your son is better off without you." Cindy stared at the card. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary for a man like him. "And what do you get?" she asked quietly. "People don't do things like this without wanting something." For a moment, Roman didn't answer. The pause stretched just long enough to feel intentional. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, rougher around the edges. "I don't want your money. I don't want your body. I don't want your gratitude." "Then what?" The question slipped out sharper than she intended. She was tired of traps disguised as kindness. "I want you to survive tonight," he said, "and tomorrow." The simplicity of it took her off guard. Cindy laughed, a short, broken sound that surprised even herself. "You make it sound so easy. It won't be," Roman said, "but it will be possible, which is more than you have right now." She turned away from him, pacing a few steps before stopping near the window. Rain streaked down the glass, blurring the parking lot into a wash of gray and yellow light. Her car was still there, battered and loyal, holding everything she couldn't afford to lose. Inside it, folded beneath a blanket, was the rabbit her son refused to sleep without. Evidence. The system would call it. Proof of instability. "You're asking me to trust you," she said without looking back. "That's not a small thing." "I'm not asking for trust," Roman replied. "I'm offering structure, rules. You decide whether to accept them." Slowly, she turned to face him again. "What rules?" "You don't ask about my work," he said. "You don't interfere in my business. You and your son stay in the house I provide until the court resolves your custody situation. After that, you're free to leave, no obligations." Her heart skipped. Just like that. Yes, it sounded too clean, too neat. Cindy had learned the hard way that life never offered clean solutions. "And my son," she pressed. "You don't come near him without my permission." Roman nodded once. "Agreed." She searched his face, looking for cracks, for annoyance, for anything that suggested resistance. There was none. The idea that he could be so calm about something so intimate frightened her more than if he had argued. "And when this is over," she continued, her voice steady now, "I walk away. You don't follow. You don't use this against me. No strings," he said. "I keep my word." Cindy closed her eyes. She thought of her son's laugh, the way it filled even the smallest spaces with light. She thought of courtrooms and file folders and strangers deciding what was best for a child they had never held. She thought of 14 hours collapsing into nothing. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Yes," Roman agreed. "You should say no." Her eyes flew open. "Then why are you still standing here because you won't?" he said quietly. She swallowed hard. "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're not afraid of me," Roman answered. "You're afraid of losing him." The truth of it hit her like a blow. Fear sharpened, clarified. Cindy looked at the man in front of her, at the impossible choice he represented. Salvation or ruin, wrapped in the same dark silhouette. "Give me a minute," she said. Roman stepped back without hesitation, turning toward the door. "I'll be outside," he said. 5 minutes. As he walked out into the rain, Cindy remained frozen, the business card warm in her palm. She watched his reflection disappear into the storm. aware of one undeniable truth. Whatever decision she made next would change the course of her life forever. Cindy counted the seconds while he stood outside in the rain. She didn't look at the clock on the wall. She didn't need to. Time pressed against her chest with every breath, relentless and unforgiving. 5 minutes was all he had given her, but the truth was, her decision had been made long before he stepped away. It had been made the moment the voice on the phone said protective custody, as if it were a neutral phrase, not a sentence that would hollow her out. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and walked toward the door. Roman was exactly where he said he would be, rain soaking into the dark fabric of his suit, his posture unbothered by the storm. He didn't turn when she approached, didn't crowd her space, didn't rush her. He waited. That, more than anything else, told her this was real. He wasn't afraid she would say no. "I have conditions," Cindy said, forcing strength into her voice. Roman turned then, his gaze sharp but attentive. "Go on. I want everything in writing." She continued. "The marriage, the terms, the timeline, I want my own room. My son stays with me at all times. You don't touch him, talk to him, or make decisions about him without my permission. And when this is over, when the court rules, I leave, no guilt, no pressure." For a long moment, Roman studied her. Not the way men usually did, not assessing her beauty or her fear, but as if weighing her resolve. Rain traced dark lines down his face, but his expression remained steady. "Agreed," he said. The word landed heavier than any promise she had ever been given. Cindy felt something shift inside her, a door closing behind her, even as another opened ahead. "Why does this feel like I'm making a deal with the devil?" she asked quietly. Roman's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Because you probably are," he said. "But the devil keeps his promises." She should have run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to choose the known danger over the unknown one. But the known danger had a name, and it wasn't Roman Rue. It was the system waiting to take her child. "How do we even do this?" she asked. "Marriage licenses, waiting periods. This can't happen overnight." "I know people," Roman replied calmly. He opened the passenger door of his car, revealing a pristine interior that smelled faintly of leather and rain. "Get in." Cindy hesitated only a second before climbing inside. The door closed with a quiet finality that echoed in her chest. As the car pulled away from the diner, she looked back once, watching the neon lights blur into nothing. Whatever she had been before tonight, she was leaving it behind. They drove through streets slick with rain, the city empty and watchful. Roman didn't speak, and Cindy didn't ask questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. When she finally did break the silence, her voice was softer. "Why did you stop at that diner police checkpoint?" he said. 2 miles up the highway." She glanced at him. "Were you running? I always am," Roman answered. "The trick is making sure it never catches you." The house they arrived at wasn't Roman's. Cindy knew that immediately. It was too ordinary for a man like him, tucked into a neighborhood that spoke of quiet respectability. The man who opened the door was middle-aged, dressed in an expensive robe, irritation written all over his face until he saw Roman. Fear replaced annoyance in a heartbeat. "I need paperwork processed tonight," Roman said without preamble. "Backdated? Complete?" "That's irregular." The man stammered. "You've done worse," Roman replied. "And you owe me." Cindy sat silently as documents were printed, signed, stamped. Hours passed in a blur of legal language and whispered instructions. She felt detached from her own body, watching herself sign her name where she was told, answering questions she barely processed as. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, it happened. She was legally married. The papers were placed in front of her, official seals glinting under the lamp. Mrs. Rue? The name looked wrong, foreign, like a costume she hadn't agreed to wear. And yet, when she touched the page, a fragile sense of relief threaded through her panic. For the first time since the phone call, there was something solid in her hands. When they stepped back into the night, the rain had eased into a mist. Roman drove them away from the house, the envelope of documents resting on Cindy's lap like a fragile shield. "We need to pick up your son," he said. Her heart clenched. "He's staying with a neighbor. Mrs. Deborah. She lives near my old apartment." Roman nodded and changed direction without comment. When they arrived, Cindy insisted on going inside with him. He didn't argue, only positioned himself slightly in front of her as they climbed the stairs. It was a subtle thing, protective without being possessive, but she noticed it. Her son ran to her the moment he saw her, arms wrapping around her legs. Cindy dropped to her knees, holding him tightly, breathing him in as if she could anchor herself with his presence alone. "We're going home," she whispered. Roman watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. When they finally left, the boy asleep against Cindy's shoulder, the car seemed quieter, heavier. Cindy looked at Roman, at the man who had just rewritten her life in a single night. "I'm trusting you," she said softly. Roman met her gaze. "No," he replied. "You're choosing your son." The words settled between them, true and undeniable, and as the city lights faded behind them, Cindy realized that whatever safety she had just gained came at a cost she had yet to fully understand. Morning arrived without warmth. Cindy woke to silence so complete it felt artificial, the kind that pressed against the ears until every breath sounded too loud. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was smooth, uncracked, nothing like the water-stained one from the apartment she'd lost. The bed was too soft. The air smelled clean, safe, and that was what frightened her most. She sat up slowly, instinctively checking the space beside her. Empty. She was alone, just as Roman had promised. Her son slept curled against the pillows on the other side of the room, one small hand clutching his stuffed rabbit, his breathing even. Relief washed through her so sharply it almost hurt. Whatever else this place was, it hadn't taken him from her. Not yet. The room was large but impersonal, clearly prepared rather than lived in. Neutral colors, no photographs, no trace of warmth. Cindy slid out of bed and crossed to the window. Beyond the glass stretched manicured grounds bordered by tall iron fencing, discreet but unmistakably secure. Cameras sat tucked beneath the eaves, barely visible unless you knew where to look. She did. Years of learning how danger hid itself had trained her eyes. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Downstairs, the house was already awake. Voices murmured behind closed doors. Footsteps moved with purpose. And somewhere metal clicked softly, repeatedly. Cindy stiffened. She followed the sound to the kitchen, where she found Roman standing near the counter, sleeves rolled back, a phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled, every word measured. "No," he said. "Not yet. And keep them away from the east wing." He ended the call as she stepped into the room. His gaze flicked to her, assessing in an instant. "Did you sleep a little?" She answered honestly. "Where are we? My house," Roman said. "You're safe here." Safe. The word echoed hollowly. Cindy glanced around. The kitchen was immaculate, untouched by habit. She noticed how the staff moved when Roman entered, how conversations stopped, how eyes lowered. Respect, yes, but also fear. "My son," she asked quietly. "He hasn't left the property," Roman replied. "No one will approach him without you present." She nodded, tension easing just a fraction. "And the court I've arranged legal counsel. The hearing is tomorrow afternoon." "Tomorrow." The word made her pulse quicken. Everything had happened so fast that she hadn't allowed herself to think beyond survival. Now the future loomed, heavy and uncertain. "What do I need to do?" Roman studied her for a moment before answering. "You need to look like you belong here." The implication unsettled her. Cindy followed him into a dressing room larger than her last apartment. Clothing hung neatly arranged, tags still attached. Nothing flashy, everything tasteful, chosen. It was a wardrobe built for appearances, not comfort. "This isn't me," she said softly, brushing her fingers over a tailored jacket. "It doesn't need to be," Roman replied. "It needs to be convincing." She dressed in silence, aware of his presence even when he wasn't in the room. When she emerged, Roman's gaze lingered for a beat too long before he looked away. The flicker of something unreadable passed between them, brief but charged. Cindy felt it and hated herself for noticing. Throughout the day, she learned the unspoken rules of the house. Where she was expected to be, where she wasn't. Which hallways were off limits. Which doors remained locked. Her son stayed close, sensing the tension despite his attempts to act brave. Cindy watched Roman from a distance, how he moved through his world with effortless authority, how people deferred without question. It was intoxicating in a way she refused to name. That afternoon, while Roman was occupied, Cindy wandered into the West Wing by mistake, or curiosity. She wasn't sure which. The corridor was dimmer here, quieter. Halfway down, she noticed a door slightly ajar. Voices drifted out, hushed but urgent. "She can't be here," someone said. "This changes things." Roman's voice followed, calm but edged with steel. "She's here because I allowed it. She's a weakness." Silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Then Roman spoke again, slower now. "Say that word again, and we'll revisit who answers to whom." Cindy stepped back, heart racing. She returned to her room, her thoughts spinning. Weakness. The word clung to her like a stain. She had spent her life being told she was one, by her husband, by the system. Now, by a world she had never asked to enter. That night, she found Roman in the library, the only room that felt faintly personal. Shelves lined with books, many worn, some annotated, not the collection of a man who pretended to read. She lingered in the doorway. "I heard them," she said quietly. "They think I'm a problem." Roman closed the book in his hands. "They don't matter. I do," she countered. "And so does my son." His gaze softened, just enough to be dangerous. "That's why you're here." She stepped closer, compelled by something she didn't understand. "If I put him at risk—" "You won't," Roman said firmly. "Not here." The certainty in his voice was comforting and terrifying. Cindy realized then that safety in this house came at the price of surrendering control. Roman wasn't keeping her captive. He was protecting her, and the line between the two was thinner than she liked. As she returned to her room, Cindy glanced back once more at the darkened hallway beyond her door. Somewhere in this house, plans were being made, lines were being crossed, and whether she liked it or not, she was already part of them. The fortress had closed its gates, and she was standing inside. The first sign that something was wrong came in the smallest, most harmless form. Cindy noticed it when she was tucking her son into bed that night. The stuffed rabbit he never slept without was missing. She checked under the blanket, then the floor, then the chair by the window. Her heart tightened as she searched the room again. Slower this time, forcing herself not to panic. Children misplaced things. It meant nothing. It had to mean nothing. She found the rabbit an hour later, sitting neatly on the pillow, its ears straightened as if someone had taken the time to fix them. Cindy didn't scream. She didn't call out. She simply sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the toy while her son slept beside her, unaware that something invisible had crossed a line. The house had cameras, guards, locked wings. No one should have been able to enter this room unnoticed. Yet someone had. The next morning, Cindy watched the staff more closely. She noticed the way a woman in a gray uniform avoided her gaze, how a man she didn't recognize lingered too long near the hallway that led to the East Wing. The fortress no longer felt impenetrable. It felt watched. Roman sensed the shift in her before she said a word. He always did. They were standing in the kitchen when he spoke, his tone casual, as if discussing the weather. "You're uneasy." "My son's rabbit moved," Cindy replied quietly. "Someone was in our room, The room went still. Roman didn't react immediately, but something changed in him, subtle and dangerous, like a blade being drawn just enough to catch the light. He turned his head slightly. "Clear the East Wing," he said into the air. People moved at once, doors opened, footsteps echoed. Orders were given without explanation. Cindy stared at him. "You said no one would approach him, and no one was supposed to." Roman replied, his jaw tightened. "Which means someone disobeyed me." Fear surged through her, sharp and uncontrollable. "You promised," she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to stay calm. "If he's not safe here, he is," Roman interrupted firmly. "But I won't pretend this didn't happen." He motioned for her to follow him. They walked through corridors she hadn't seen before, past doors that required biometric access, until they reached a small control room lined with monitors. Roman studied the screens in silence while someone replayed footage from the previous night. Nothing appeared out of place. No doors opened. No figures entered her room. "Someone knows how to move through my house," Roman said at last. "And they wanted you to know it." Cindy wrapped her arms around herself. "Why?" "Because you matter now," he answered. "And that makes you leverage." The word landed hard. Leverage. Cindy thought of all the times she had been treated like an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. Now she was something worse, a weakness others could exploit. Later that afternoon, Roman left the house for the first time since they arrived. He didn't say where he was going, only that he would be back before nightfall. Cindy watched him leave from the window, unease curling in her stomach. Without him, the house felt hollow, its protection suddenly theoretical. That was when the note appeared. It was slipped beneath the door while she was in the shower, a single folded sheet of paper resting on the floor when she stepped out. No alarm sounded. No guard appeared. Cindy picked it up with trembling fingers. "You don't belong here. Children get hurt when they're in the wrong place." Her breath caught. She crushed the note in her fist and rushed to her son's room. He was there, building a tower of blocks on the carpet, humming to himself. Relief nearly brought her to her knees. She knelt and pulled him into her arms, holding him too tightly until he squirmed. "Mama, you're squeezing," he complained softly. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." Roman returned after dark. One look at Cindy's face told him everything. She handed him the note without a word. He read it once, then tore it in half, then in quarters, then into pieces too small to matter. "They crossed a line," he said. Cindy stepped back. "No," she said sharply. "You don't get to say that like it's just business. This is my child." Roman's gaze softened, but his voice remained steady. "That's exactly why I'm saying it." She shook her head, panic rising. "I can't do this. If staying here puts him in danger." "Leaving puts him in more," Roman said. "They won't stop because you walk away. They'll follow. This house is still the safest place for him." "Because of you," Cindy said bitterly. "This is happening because of you." Silence stretched between them. Roman didn't deny it. He didn't excuse it. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, stripped of its usual armor. "Yes." The honesty stunned her. "Then fix it," she demanded. "Or let us go." Roman looked at her for a long moment. In his eyes, Cindy saw the weight of choices she couldn't imagine, the kind that left blood on the hands no matter which path you chose. "I can end this tonight," he said quietly. The implication chilled her. She understood it without him needing to explain. Violence. Finality. The world he came from knew how to erase problems completely. "No," Cindy said immediately. "Not like that," Roman's eyes narrowed. "You don't know what they'll do. I know what you'll do," she replied. "And I won't let my son grow up knowing his safety was bought with blood." Something fractured in Roman then, just slightly. He looked away, jaw tight, as if restraining something feral beneath the surface. When he faced her again, his voice was controlled, but strained. "Then I'll find another way." That night, Cindy lay awake listening to the sounds of the house, every creak amplified by fear. She realized that safety here wasn't a promise. It was a negotiation, one that could break at any moment. And for the first time since stepping into Roman Rue's world, Cindy wondered whether surviving the system had only led her into a far more dangerous fight. The morning of the hearing arrived too quickly, stripped of drama, heavy with consequence. Cindy woke before dawn, her body already tense, as if it knew the day would demand something she wasn't sure she could give. She lay still for a moment, listening to her son's breathing beside her, counting each rise and fall of his chest like a promise she intended to keep. Roman didn't come to her room. He never did. Instead, a knock sounded at precisely 7. When she opened the door, a woman stood there holding a garment bag and a calm, professional smile. Everything in this house moved with unsettling precision. Cindy dressed slowly, deliberately, choosing care over fear. Today wasn't about blending into Roman's world. It was about proving she belonged in her son's. Roman waited downstairs. He wore a dark suit, immaculate, restrained. The kind of man who made rooms rearrange themselves around his presence. When he looked at her, something unreadable passed between them. Fleeting, but charged. He didn't comment on how she looked. He didn't need to. This wasn't a performance for each other. It was for the court. The drive to the courthouse was quiet. Cindy watched the city wake around them, unaware that her entire life was about to be measured and judged within its walls. Her son sat in the back seat, swinging his legs, humming softly. Roman's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror for a brief second, a silent reminder that whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. The courtroom smelled of paper and disinfectant. It was smaller than Cindy had imagined, more intimate, which somehow made it worse. She felt exposed, as if every flaw she carried was visible under the fluorescent lights. Roman stood beside her, solid, immovable. His presence drew attention, quiet murmurs rippling through the room as people recognized something about him they couldn't quite name. The judge entered. Proceedings began. The questions came fast, efficient, devoid of sympathy. Cindy answered each one carefully, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She spoke of stability, of support, of a marriage that existed on paper but carried real responsibility. She avoided Roman's gaze, afraid that if she looked at him, she would falter. Then the tone shifted. A woman from Child Protective Services stood and presented new information. Cindy's past was laid bare with clinical precision police reports, hospital visits, nights spent without a fixed address. Each fact felt like a blade, sharp and impersonal. She felt herself shrinking, the old shame clawing its way back into her chest. And this marriage, the woman continued, turning toward Roman. It was entered into less than 24 hours before this hearing. A murmur swept the room. Roman stepped forward before Cindy could speak. The timing does not invalidate the commitment, he said calmly. Commitment, the woman countered. Or convenience? Cindy's heart pounded. She could feel the ground shifting beneath her, the narrative slipping out of her control. This was the moment she had feared, the moment where everything she'd survived was used against her. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Rue, he said, there are concerns regarding your background. The word background felt loaded, dangerous. Cindy glanced at Roman, panic flaring. This was it. If his past surfaced now, if the court connected even a fraction of the truth to her case, she would lose everything. Roman didn't flinch. I understand, he replied evenly. Your financial records are extensive, the judge continued. Your business interests, opaque, that was as far as it went. The judge didn't push, didn't pry. Cindy sensed it immediately, the hesitation. Roman's world cast a shadow even here, subtle but unmistakable. The system knew when not to ask too many questions, but hesitation wasn't enough to save her. The judge turned back to Cindy. Ms. Whitmer, he said, your love for your child is not in question, but love alone does not create a safe environment. Something snapped. Cindy stood. The movement was small, but it cut through the room like a blade. Roman turned sharply, surprise flashing across his face. This wasn't planned. This wasn't part of the strategy. With respect. Your Honor, Cindy said, her voice steady, clear. I have spent years being told what I lack, what I don't have, what I am not. No one ever asks what I've done to keep my child safe. She felt the room hold its breath. I left an abusive marriage with nothing because staying would have killed me. She continued. I slept in my car because it meant my son slept with me, not with strangers. Every decision I made was about him, not convenience. Survival. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. This marriage didn't happen because I needed a man. It happened because the system gave me no other way to prove what I already am. A mother who will do anything to protect her child. Silence followed. Heavy, unforgiving. The judge studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke. The court will recess. The words landed like a suspended sentence. Outside the courtroom, Cindy's legs finally gave way. Roman caught her before she fell, his hand firm on her arm, grounding her. For a second, the world narrowed to the space between them. That was risky, he said quietly. I know, she replied. But I couldn't let them decide for me. Something softened in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so easily. You didn't, he said. The recess felt endless. When they were called back in, Cindy's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break free of her ribs. The judge delivered his decision with measured care. The ruling was postponed. A temporary arrangement would remain in place until further evaluation. Cindy would keep her son for now. Relief flooded her, sharp and overwhelming. She barely registered the words beyond that. She had won time. Nothing more. Nothing less. As they left the courthouse, Roman's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening. They're not done, he said quietly. Cindy looked up at him, exhaustion and fear mingling in her chest. Neither am I. The day had spared her, but only just. And somewhere beyond the courthouse steps, forces were already moving, unwilling to let her victory stand. The drive back from the courthouse was quieter than the one that had brought them there. Cindy sat in the back seat with her son asleep against her shoulder, his small weight anchoring her to the present. The temporary victory tasted fragile, like glass held too tightly. She knew better than to believe the worst was over. So did Roman. He drove without speaking, his focus absolute, hands steady on the wheel. Only once did Cindy notice his jaw tighten, the muscle jumping beneath the skin as if something inside him was fighting to break free. When they reached the house, the gate slid shut behind them with a muted finality that made her chest tighten. Inside, the staff dispersed quietly. Sensing the shift in the air, Cindy carried her son upstairs and laid him down, brushing his hair back from his forehead until his breathing evened out again. She lingered there longer than necessary, memorizing the simple miracle of his presence, because something in her told her that calm moments like this were becoming rare. When she finally went downstairs, she found Roman in the library. He stood by the window, one hand resting against the glass. The city lights reflected faintly in his eyes. The room felt different at night, less controlled, more exposed. You were right, Cindy said softly, breaking the silence. They're not done. Roman didn't turn. They won't stop, he replied. Not now. She stepped closer, careful not to crowd him. Then tell me the truth. That made him face her. What truth, he asked, though they both knew he understood. The kind that explains why people are willing to threaten a child just to reach you. She said, the kind you've been protecting me from. For a long moment, Roman said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and deliberate. Cindy had the sense that whatever came next would change the shape of things between them. That once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. Finally, he exhaled slowly. My mother, he said. She was like you. The words caught her off guard, like me trapped. Roman continued, married to a man who knew exactly how to hurt her without leaving marks anyone cared about. When she finally ran, she had nothing, no money, no family willing to help. She asked for protection, for time. Cindy felt her chest tighten. She didn't interrupt. She went to people who promised safety. Roman said, men in suits who said they understood her situation. They told her it was complicated, that helping her would create problems. They suggested shelters, paperwork, patience. His voice remained even, but something dark flickered beneath it. She didn't have patience. She had a child and fear. What happened? Cindy asked quietly. Roman looked away. No one stepped in. And one night, when she thought she was finally safe, the man she ran from found her. The room seemed to close in around them. Cindy swallowed hard. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Roman said. Pity doesn't change outcomes. He turned fully toward her now, his expression stripped of its usual restraint. I learned 2 things that night. First, that the world doesn't protect women like her unless there's a reason to. And second, that power is the only language fear respects. Cindy understood then, not just the violence whispered around his name, but the purpose behind it. Everything you built, she said slowly. It was so no one could ever ignore you again. Yes, Roman replied. So when I say someone will be safe, it's not a suggestion. She took a breath, steadying herself. Then why is my son still in danger? Because I broke my own rule. He said, I let you close enough to matter. The admission hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Cindy felt a pull she didn't want to acknowledge, an understanding that went deeper than fear. You didn't do this just to save me, she said. You did it to save her. Roman didn't deny it. That night, Cindy couldn't sleep. The truth weighed on her, reshaping everything she thought she knew. Roman wasn't a savior. He was a man trying to rewrite a story that had already ended once in blood and silence. She slipped out of bed and walked the quiet halls until she reached the library again. Roman was still there, sitting now, his jacket discarded, the tension in his posture unmistakable. I won't let my son become your lesson, she said gently but firmly. His head lifted, eyes meeting hers. He won't. And I won't let you use him to heal something that was never your fault. She continued. You don't get to make him the cost of your redemption. Roman's gaze sharpened. You think I don't know that I think, Cindy said, stepping closer, that you're used to choosing the lesser evil. And I'm telling you we're choosing something else. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. Charged. Intimate. You're asking me to change how I survive, Roman said quietly. I'm asking you to survive differently, she replied. For the first time since she'd met him, Roman looked uncertain, not weak, human. If I step back, he said, they'll test the limits. Then let them test us together, Cindy said. The word together settled into the space between them, tentative but undeniable. Roman held her gaze, something raw and unresolved flickering beneath the surface. Outside, the city pulsed with unseen movement. Enemies recalculated. Lines were redrawn. And inside the house that had become both refuge and battleground, two people stood at the edge of a choice that would define what came next. Not just who they would fight, but who they would become. The message arrived just after midnight. Roman was still awake when his phone vibrated against the desk, the screen lighting the darkened room with a single line of text. He read it once, then again, his expression hardening into something Cindy had learned to recognize, a stillness that preceded violence. She felt it before she saw it. Roman's silence carried weight. What is it, she asked, already moving closer, her pulse quickening. They've made their move, he said. His voice was calm, but beneath it ran something sharp and lethal. They took something that belongs to us. Her breath caught. My son number, Roman answered immediately. Not yet. The relief was instant and brutal, leaving her dizzy. Not yet isn't good enough, she said. He met her gaze. They want me to react, to remind the city who I am. And if you do, Cindy asked, they'll stop testing me, he replied. Permanently. She knew what that meant. She had always known. Roman's world didn't resolve conflict with negotiations or apologies. It erased threats until none remained. And for the first time, she understood how easy it would be for him to choose that path, how justified it would feel. What did they take, she asked, knowing the answer would hurt. The court clerk, Roman said. The one who processed your paperwork. He's alive. For now. Cindy's stomach twisted. Innocent people, always collateral. This is because of us, she said quietly. This is because of me, Roman corrected. You're just the reason they think I have something to lose. The words stung because they were true. Cindy turned away, pressing her palms against the cool glass of the window. Outside, the grounds lay quiet, deceptive in their peace. Then let me go, she said. If I'm the leverage, remove me from the equation. Roman's response was immediate. No, you said I could leave when the court was done, she said, her voice shaking. This is bigger than that now. He crossed the room in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. If you leave, he said, they won't stop. They'll follow. You won't have walls. You won't have protection. And your son? Don't, Cindy snapped, turning to face him. Don't use him to justify this. The tension between them crackled, sharp and volatile. Roman exhaled slowly, reining himself in. I can end this tonight, he repeated. I know where they are. I know how to make sure no one ever threatens you again. Cindy saw it then, clear as day. This wasn't just strategy. It was instinct. This was how Roman survived, how he had always survived. By striking first, by striking hardest, by never allowing the world a second chance to hurt him. And what happens after, she asked. After the blood is spilled, after your enemies are gone. Roman didn't answer. What happens to you? She pressed. To the man you're trying not to be. Silence fell heavy between them. Roman looked at her as if she were asking him to step off a cliff without knowing if the ground would be there. You think restraint will save us, he said quietly. It won't. I think, Cindy replied, stepping closer, that if you do this, my son will grow up knowing his safety came from fear and death. And I won't accept that. Her voice broke, but she didn't look away. If you choose that path, she continued, you lose us, not because I'm afraid of you, but because I refuse to let him inherit this world. Roman's jaw clenched. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. For a moment, Cindy thought he might ignore her, that he might choose the certainty of violence over the fragile promise she was offering. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. Cindy saw his eyes darken as he looked at the screen. They're escalating, he said. They're moving closer. Her heart pounded. How close, Roman hesitated. The perimeter. Fear surged through her, raw and immediate. My son is here, I know. In that moment, everything sharpened into focus. There was no more time for theory or morality, only choice. Cindy reached for Roman's arm, stopping him as he turned toward the door. Look at me, she said. He did. You taught me something, she continued. That power is the only language fear understands. But you forgot something else. Fear listens to love too. It just doesn't expect it. Roman stared at her, the storm inside him warring with the control he'd spent a lifetime perfecting. This could get him killed, he said. It could save him. Cindy replied, but only if you trust me. Trust. The word hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Roman had built his life on control, not trust, on certainty, not hope. Yet here she stood, asking him to choose uncertainty for the sake of a future neither of them could see clearly. Outside, a distant alarm sounded short, sharp, then silenced. They're testing our response time, Roman said. Cindy took a breath, steadying herself, then let them see something new. Roman closed his eyes briefly, as if committing something to memory. When he opened them again, the decision was made. No blood. He said, not tonight. Relief and terror crashed through Cindy at once. Are you sure? No, Roman admitted, but I'm willing to try. Orders were given. Security tightened. Communications rerouted. Instead of retaliation, Roman set traps designed to expose rather than destroy, to warn rather than erase. It was slower, riskier, everything he despised. As the night stretched on, Cindy sat with her son, holding him close while Roman fought a war he had never fought this way before, not with force, but with restraint. And as dawn approached, Cindy realized something profound. Roman Rue hadn't chosen peace. He had chosen them, and that choice would demand a price far greater than blood. The city didn't explode the way Roman's enemies expected it to. No sirens screamed into the night. No bodies appeared in alleyways as warnings. Instead, silence spread uneasy, suspicious, deliberate. Roman had chosen restraint, and restraint unsettled people who only understood fear. By morning, the first cracks appeared. Information leaked. Quiet arrests were made under the guise of unrelated investigations. A financial network collapsed without a single public explanation. One by one, the hands reaching toward Roman's life withdrew not because they had been destroyed, but because they had been exposed. Power, Cindy realized, didn't always roar. Sometimes it erased quietly. She watched it happen from a distance, holding her son in the garden as dawn light softened the edges of the house. Roman moved through the grounds speaking in low voices, issuing instructions that sounded nothing like orders of war. He looked tired, not the physical exhaustion she recognized from long shifts and sleepless nights, but something deeper, the fatigue of a man standing against the gravity of his own nature. It ended without ceremony. By midday, Roman came to her with the news. The threat had receded, not eliminated, but neutralized enough to give them breathing room. The clerk had been released. The messages stopped. The perimeter alarms fell silent. Cindy listened carefully, searching his face for triumph. There was none. "It's done," he said. "For now," she replied. He nodded. "For now." That was when she knew. Cindy spent the afternoon packing. Not hurriedly, not secretly. Each item she folded felt like a quiet goodbye to a version of herself that had needed this house to survive. She packed her son's clothes, his books, the stuffed rabbit that had become a symbol of everything she feared losing. When she reached the bottom of the suitcase, she paused, then added the court documents. Proof, not of marriage, but of motherhood. Roman found her in the doorway. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The word hurt more than she expected. Cindy kept her hands busy, closing the zipper, grounding herself in small movements. "The court ruled this morning," she continued. "Full custody, no conditions." His chest tightened. He had known this moment would come. He had promised it would. Still, knowing didn't make it easier. "You're safe now," he said. "You could stay." She turned to face him. "That's why I have to go." Roman searched her face, as if looking for hesitation he could hold on to. There was none. Only resolve, quiet and unyielding. The same resolve that had made her stand up in court. The same resolve that had stopped him from choosing blood. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly, as if sensing the weight gathering in him. "You never did." "I know," Roman replied. "That doesn't change." "It changes everything," she interrupted gently. "Because if I stay, it won't be because I need protection. And you're not ready for that." The truth landed cleanly between them. Roman had spent his life being needed, feared, obeyed. Being chosen freely was a language he hadn't yet learned to speak. Cindy stepped closer, close enough that she could see the cracks in his control. "You did something impossible," she said. "You protected us without becoming the man you were afraid to be. And you're leaving anyway," he said quietly. "Yes," she admitted, "because my son deserves a life that isn't built around surviving someone else's enemies. And you deserve the chance to decide who you are without us being the reason." Roman looked away. The house felt suddenly too large, too empty. "If you walk out that gate," he said, "I won't follow." "I know," Cindy said. "That's why this matters." They stood there for a long moment, the space between them heavy with everything they hadn't said. There was no kiss, no dramatic farewell, just the shared understanding that this wasn't an ending born of failure, but of choice. Cindy took her son's hand and walked toward the door. He glanced back once, offering Roman a small wave. Roman lifted his hand in return, his throat tight. At the gate. Cindy paused. She didn't turn around. Some goodbyes were too fragile to survive eye contact. "You saved us," she said. "But don't make us the last good thing you ever protect." Then she was gone. The gates closed with a soft, final sound. Roman stood there long after the car disappeared from view. The silence pressed in, unfamiliar and raw. For the first time in his life, he wasn't reacting. He wasn't chasing a threat or eliminating a weakness. He was letting go. That night, Roman began dismantling his empire, not burning it down, not abandoning it, but stepping back piece by piece. Power redistributed, lines severed. A different kind of legacy began to take shape, slower and less absolute, but sustainable. Weeks passed. Cindy built a small, ordinary life filled with routines and laughter. No guards, no walls, just mornings that belonged to them. Sometimes, late at night, she thought of Roman Rue, not as the man who saved her, but as the man who let her leave. And somewhere across the city, Roman stood alone in a quiet house, learning that love didn't always stay. Sometimes, it trusted you enough to walk away. Spring arrived quietly, without announcements or turning points. Cindy noticed it in small, ordinary ways, sunlight lingering longer in the afternoons. Her son racing ahead of her on the sidewalk with a laugh that no longer carried fear. The feeling that her shoulders were no longer permanently tense. Life had narrowed into something manageable, predictable, safe. She had found a modest apartment near a public park, close enough to schools and far from anything that carried a memory she couldn't control. Her days were filled with routines she had once taken for granted, packing lunches, folding laundry, answering emails for a job that paid just enough to keep them comfortable. No guards, no cameras, no doors that locked from the outside. And yet, sometimes, at night, she still thought of Roman Rue, not as the man who had offered her a marriage in the rain, not as the force that had bent systems and silenced threats, but as the man who had stood still and let her walk away when every instinct in him had demanded control. Across the city, Roman was learning how to live in the absence of urgency. The house no longer hummed with constant motion. Entire wings stood empty now, their purpose gone. He had dismantled his empire the way one removed a blade from flesh slowly, carefully, accepting the pain that came with it. Power had been redistributed, old alliances dissolved. New structures rose in their place, quieter, less absolute. He no longer ruled from fear. He advised. He intervened only when necessary. And for the first time in his life, his evenings were his own. One afternoon, months later, Roman found himself standing outside a park he hadn't intended to visit. He told himself it was coincidence, geography, habit. He stood there longer than necessary, watching families move through the space with careless ease. Then he saw her. Cindy sat on a bench beneath a tree, her face tilted toward the sun, her expression relaxed in a way he had never seen before. Her son ran circles around the playground, shouting something about being faster than the wind. Roman felt something shift inside him, not sharp, not dangerous, gentle. She noticed him a moment later. Their eyes met across the distance, and for an instant, the world narrowed to a familiar stillness. Cindy stood slowly, unsure, as if approaching a memory rather than a man. Roman didn't move until she did. He waited. Always. "You look different," she said when she reached him. "So do you," Roman replied. They stood there, neither stepping too close, neither stepping away. The space between them was deliberate, respectful. No contracts, no urgency, no walls. "I didn't expect to see you," Cindy admitted. "I didn't expect to be here," Roman said. Then, after a pause, "I wanted to know how you were." She smiled, small but real. "We're good. Really good. I can see that." Her son spotted them then and ran over, skidding to a stop in front of Roman. "Hi," he said, unapologetically curious. Roman crouched to his level, a habit he hadn't realized he'd kept. "Hi," he replied. "You've gotten taller." The boy grinned. "Mom says that all the time." Cindy watched the exchange, her heart steady. There was no fear in her now, no calculation, just awareness. They walked together for a while, speaking of small things. Work, school, the weather. It felt almost surreal. How normal it all was. When they reached the edge of the park, Cindy slowed. "I meant what I said," she told him. "About you deserving to decide who you are without us being the reason." Roman nodded. "And I did." She searched his face. "Are you at peace?" The question wasn't casual. It mattered. Roman considered it carefully. "I'm learning," he said. "And I stopped surviving." Cindy replied. "I started living." The honesty between them felt like a gift neither of them wanted to mishandle. There was no promise in the air, no expectation pressing down. Just a possibility, fragile and real. "I won't follow you," Roman said softly. "I won't interfere." "If you want distance, this isn't about distance," Cindy interrupted gently. "It's about choice." She took a breath, then another. "I don't need you, and you don't owe me anything." Roman's gaze never left hers. "I know. But," she continued, "if we were to see each other again, it would be because we want to. Nothing else." For a long moment, Roman said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I would like that." They exchanged a number. No ceremony, no wait, just a simple act that carried intention. As Cindy walked away with her son, Roman didn't feel the ache he once associated with letting go. He felt something steadier. Hope, not as a desperate grasp, but as an open hand. Weeks passed, then months. Their meetings were unremarkable in the best way. Coffee, walks, conversations that didn't circle around fear or obligation. Cindy laughed more. Roman listened more. Neither tried to rush the other into something familiar and dangerous. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the city softened around them, Cindy reached for Roman's hand, not because she needed him, because she chose him. He closed his fingers around hers, the contact gentle, unclaimed. For the first time, there was no deal being made, no sacrifice demanded. Just two people standing in a future they had earned the hard way. And that, in the end, was the happiest ending either of them could have imagined.